some context. On the 31st of October 2020 at 6:30 p.m, Prime Minister Boris Johnson began his address announcing the second national lockdown. And I want to pick up the messages between yourself and Nicola Sturgeon, which start 10 minutes into the address. So if we read the first message on the 31st of October at 6:40, you say, hitting the 15 minutes between the rugby and strictly to lock the country up. Let us never do this like this. Nicola Sturgeon replies, their comms are behind awful. We're not perfect, but we don't get nearly enough credit for how much better than them we are. She then replies, this is fucking excruciating. Their comms are awful. Then she goes on to say, his utter incompetence in every sense is now offending me on behalf of politicians everywhere. You reply saying, I have a separate WhatsApp with, and the name's redacted, and Davy, and we are offended on behalf of spads everywhere. Nicola Sturgeon says, he is a fucking clown. So, was there a perception amongst Nicola Sturgeon and the wider Scottish Government that it was doing so much better than the UK Government in the pandemic response around this time?
I think this refers specifically to the communications aspect of the response. And that's sometimes dismissed, but communications is very important in a public health situation. People need to know what to do and why, and to understand it and to trust in it. And this was the end result of a day that had been quite shambolic in the UK government, and that has an impact on what people see and think in Scotland about the pandemic as overall. So while he was announcing something that was not relevant to Scotland, this sort of chaos that appeared around some of the decisions they took, we then had to work hard to mitigate, because people in Scotland see both. And so, yeah, we were clearly not very complimentary about their communications handling that day.
Is it fair to say that the relationship between Nicola Sturgeon and Boris Johnson, by this date, had completely broken down?
I think broken down, to a degree, overstates what was there to break. They had met on a number of occasions. There was always a politeness, a business-like approach to it. When Boris Johnson first became Prime Minister and came to meet Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland, they had a discussion that I think has been described publicly as well as it was more like a debate, two intelligent people engaged in discussion about policy issues. When we got to COVID, I think it was much harder. It was evident in his exchanges with the Scottish Government, with the First Minister, and I think with the other First Ministers, because we would all be on the same call, that he didn't want to be on those calls. He wasn't necessarily well briefed on those calls, and he wasn't listening to the points we were making on those calls. And so I think engagement with him came to be seen as slightly pointless during this period.